that just about everything you discuss relates in some way or another to natural law. And so whatever the question was, I would just take what I understood about natural law and I would apply it to whatever the situation was. I didn't call it natural law. I didn't come out and say, I'm giving you natural law. But I just talked about the principles of liberty. Liberty is the natural law. So what you need to do is simply express the principles of liberty. And the resonating takes place on its own. You don't have to really set. That is if they're open to it. If they're not open to it, it doesn't matter. They reject it. But if they're open to it, all you need to do is articulate the principles of liberty, which requires a little bit of study on our part. It requires a little bit of knowledge on our part, that we know how to articulate the principles of liberty. But when you do that, like for example, we got talking about abortion. And everybody else on the panel, every other panelist was pro-abortion or pro-choice. I was the only one that was pro-life. And when I first stated my position as being pro-life, there was a smattering of boos out there in the audience. And I knew that, they've been taught pro-choice, and so, okay. So, I didn't thump a Bible verse and all of that. I went to the Declaration of Independence. I said, how many of you believe in the Declaration of Independence? And just about every hand went up. And I said, how many of you know it was written by Thomas Jefferson? Just about every hand went up. I said, how many of you know that Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian in the traditional sense? Just about every hand went up. I said, have you read the Declaration of Independence? And most of the hands went up. And I said, okay, when you read it, what did you read? You read this. It is self-evident that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. That among these are kids. What's the first one?
Life.
Life. I said, so the only question is, it's not whether or not we have a right to life. You know what we do? The only question is, when does life begin? And so then I went into a little explanation as to how we know life begins at conception. I talked about the manifestation of life, and the heartbeat, and brain activity, and all these things. And how that in the early days, like in the 1970s, when Roe v. Wade was passed, medical science really didn't have the technology to go into the womb and study the embryo. But now we do. And medical science, and I talked about some of the former abortionist doctors, like Bernard Nathanson, who ran the largest abortion clinic in the country in New York City, who said that he personally superintended over the deaths of over 60,000 unborn babies. This was back in the 70s. But then he began to realize as medical technology advanced that this was not just a blob of tissue. This was a human being. And therefore he reputed it. And he wrote a book called Aborting America. And he's not a Christian, he's a Jew. And I encouraged everybody to, but I went into that. And by the time I got done, everybody was, I didn't say a word about the Bible. I didn't give a verse, I didn't give anything like that. But I talked about the principle of liberty from the Declaration of Independence. And it resonated. That kind of thing. Okay?